The Pennsylvania Railroad Class S1 was a glorious piece of American engineering. Gorgeous, sleek, powerful. She is arguably one of the most impressive steam locomotives ever constructed. Also, she lasted less than 10 years and was scrapped. Why? Before we begin, a quick thank you and shout out to Jess over at How to Rule an Asteroid. She is the one that put together the new intro you just saw, which looks really, really nice. Thank you again. I'll leave a link to her channel down in the description. She talks about a lot of paleontology stuff, kind of like I do over on Prehistory in the Dark. But we're not here to talk about any of that today. We're talking about this majestic beast that we were robbed of. We were robbed, I say! The S1 was a single example of an experimental duplex locomotive, built by the Pennsylvania Railroad themselves at their Altoona works. Her serial number there was 4341, though her running number was 6100. She was a massive piece of work, and as a duplex, she, okay, you might look at this and be like, oh, she looks kind of like a big boy. No, a big boy is a simple articulate. A duplex locomotive can look similar, but in this case, while they do have two separate sets of driving wheels, in a duplex setup, they divide the force of the drivers using two pairs of cylinders rigidly mounted to a single frame. There's no articulation on her drivers, and that was by design. Now, the benefit of that is that she was capable of very, very high speeds, though the disadvantages involve not being able to turn, but more on that later. She was meant to demonstrate the advantages of a duplex drive setup that were being pushed at the time by the Baldwin chief engineer Ralph P. Johnson, and her streamlined Art Deco style was designed by Raymond Loewy, a French-born American industrial designer. She had a very unique 6-4-4-6 wheel arrangement. In a similar case to the S2, yeah, she had a completely unique wheel arrangement all by herself. No other locomotive is known to have had this. And to be clear, she was enormous. Including her tender, she was 140 feet, 2.5 inches, that's 42.74 meters long, making her the longest reciprocating steam locomotive ever built. She also had the heaviest tender, which by itself weighed 451,840 pounds, the highest tractive effort of a passenger steam locomotive when she was built at 76,403 pounds of force, and the largest driving wheels, 7 feet in diameter, ever used on a locomotive with more than 3 driving axles. At 7,200 horsepower and a potential operating speed of over 120 miles per hour, she possessed unspeakable power. And they even gave her a nickname, the Big Engine. Really, it took you all day to come up with that one, didn't you guys? You thought for how long before you came? You could have called her anything. The Alpha, the Omega, the Infinite. No, you went with the Big Engine. Okay. A little too on the nose and basic for my taste, but whatever. In terms of the background behind the creation of this particular locomotive, well, in the 1930s, the Pennsylvania Railroad was already talking about constructing new passenger locomotives because they still were using the K4s, which were Pacifics, and the K4s were great. Also, they needed something better. It had been a while. They were getting old, and every time they tried to replace them, it never seemed to work too well. On their electric lines, they had already done so with the GG1, which were doing great, but they wanted a new steam engine that would be equal in performance to the GG1, capable of hauling a 1,000-ton passenger train at 100 miles per hour. When it came to this particular requirement, Baldwin did present a few options to them, including a 484 design, as well as 4444 designs. The Pennsy opted to reject the 484 idea and favored a duplex design, which was a little bit of an experimental concept, but had potential. They also suggested the wheel arrangement of 4-4-6-4, interestingly enough. But eventually they settled on a 4-4-4-4 design, and asked Baldwin to consider a passenger version with 6-foot 8-inch drivers, as well as a freight version with simply 6-foot drivers. But none of this interaction between the Pennsy and Baldwin was really set in stone. There was no contract in place during this, and things did not really go smoothly. Baldwin, we're the experts here, but the Pennsy wanted things a certain way, and Baldwin was like, yeah, but what about this? And they were like, no, we want it this way, and they were like, well, actually, no, fine, we'll do it ourselves. Well, actually, what they did is get the other two major suppliers involved. They tasked a consortium of Baldwin, Alco, and Lima employees under a joint contract to try to give them what they actually wanted, starting with the 4-4-4-4 duplex design. On June 2nd of 1937, the Pennsy would officially announce the development of what they were calling the Pennsylvania type, a high-speed passenger locomotive, which would eventually just be called the S1. However, the design process did not go super smoothly, mostly down to the wheel arrangement. See, this design was going to be heavy. Really heavy. And all the designers would wind up realizing that, we need more axles. So, that's why she wound up with 6 leading and 6 trailing wheels, a 6-4-4-6. She needed the extra axles to keep her weight down so she wouldn't break something. There were substantial potential benefits of a duplex design. She would be able to have lighter machinery, shorter cylinder stroke, less wear, lower piston thrust, smaller cylinders in general, and a more stable frame. In a duplex design, the physics work to their advantage because they don't have as much hammer blow as they otherwise would. The two distinct sets of drivers with 4 wheels rather than, 8 on a single set could have lighter running gear. And with less wear on the tracks, well, that's less maintenance overall, which all railways like to hear. But this wasn't going to be an easy task because they decided to go big or go home. She was going to be enormous. And her cast steel locomotive bed plate, which was created by General Steel Castings, was the largest single piece casting ever made for any locomotive. Period. And in terms of her being rigid and not articulated, well, they did think about that. While technically not articulated in the traditional sense, Alco would supply lateral motion devices equipped on her first and third set of driving wheels. That would allow those specific axles to move, just 2¼ inches actually, not much, but move a bit to allow her to better negotiate curves, though in the end it would prove not to be enough. Some other duplex designs tried having flangeless wheels or blind drivers to compensate for this, but the S1 never attempted that. In March of 1938, a Chicago and Northwestern class E4 was tested by the Pennsy. The E4s were 464 Hudsons, and based on that test, the Pennsy decided to adopt 84-inch drivers and a cylinder pressure operating at 300 psi. Because why not? They actually had to modify stall number 30 of the Crestline roundhouse to accommodate her because of how long she was going to be. She wouldn't have fit otherwise. She had her own special spot, just for her. They even had to add a connection in the back because the S1 could not fit on the turntable. She wasn't going to. There was no way, and they weren't. She was really big, you guys. But she did also have Timken roller bearings. Nice. And her boiler. Yeah, that was a thing. Her boiler was the largest one ever built by the Pennsylvania Railroad, with 660 square feet of direct heating surface and 500 1-inch diameter tubes. It was almost as big as the boilers used on the big boy locomotives over on Union Pacific. To be precise, the S1's boiler was 99.3% as massive as the boilers the big boys used. So not quite as big, but almost as close as you possibly could get. And interestingly, despite that, In terms of drawbar horsepower, the S1 was 13% more powerful than the big boys. The big boys only operated at 6,345 horsepower. As I mentioned, the S1 hit 7,200. She used a very large Belpaire-style firebox, and also very large. Everything about her was large. I don't know why I keep specifying that. Worthington 6SA feed water heater. That was fitted with a 7SA pump to feed the boiler enough water because it needed it. And her streamlining was not just meant to look stylish. I mean, it did, but Raymond Loewy also conducted wind tunnel testing on his design using a clay model of her at the Guggenheim Aeronautical Laboratory. That actually led to him redesigning the smoke lifting plate around her smokestack to make it handle the wind even better, so she was very aerodynamic as a direct result. In total, she cost $669,780 to build. That's about $15.5 million today. And to be clear, that was very expensive for a single locomotive. Her closely related cousins, the Pennsy T1s, which were also duplexes, were much cheaper than that. Half the cost, frankly. But they still did it. The Pennsy was in good financial condition, and on December 21st, 1938, right before Christmas, she was done. And on the same day, she made her first road test with just 2 cars, hitting 50 miles per hour at the time. And from the get-go, what was really noticed about her was that she really liked to run. And run fast. The ride on her was very smooth, and she was a free steamer. Despite her size, she was very well engineered, and her boiler was fed plenty. Once you got her rolling, she just wanted to go. In 1939, she'd be displayed at the New York World's Fair, with the lettering American Railroads rather than Pennsylvania Railroad. This is because, they didn't have a lot of room, and she was really big. And 27 Eastern railroads had only 17 acres to work with, and Baltimore and Ohio brought an N1 with them, which was also a duplex. So yeah, there wasn't a lot of room. But she was a highlight. She was so impressive. And that was one of the most notable things about her. Just standing near her was awe-striking. And she didn't just sit and be gawked at. No. While at the fair, her drivers operated under her own power, running continuously on a roller platform at 60 miles per hour for an entire day. And officially, she'd start her actual service career in December of 1940, running between Chicago and Pittsburgh. In terms of performance, there were basically no issues. It has been suggested that as a duplex, which is normal for them, she might have suffered from wheel slip, but this also has been somewhat attributed to mismanagement by her crews who weren't used to, all this. There was a lot of power, and like I said, she really wanted to go. In truth, her wheel slip issues may have been somewhat exaggerated, because despite the fact that less than half of her total weight was on the drivers, her factor of adhesion was not so different from other successful designs, such as the Norfolk and Western J-Class. And during her career, she never suffered an accident due to the wheel slip. That was never really a problem. They did give her an enlarged sand dome just to help offset that, but what was really a genuine problem was just how big she was. When she was in operation, pulling something, no issues. Quite the opposite, she was phenomenal. She was fast, easy to work with, a free steamer. Crews adored her for that. And it has been rumored and suggested that she may have unofficially broken the Mallard's speed record for steam locomotives. She was never officially tested to hit her maximum potential speed. Some say she may have actually exceeded 150 on at least one occasion. And given her power output and the fact she was designed for speed, I mean, I could believe that she probably could have beaten the Mallard's record had she been given the chance. But because it's unverified, we can't say for sure. Her size is what held her back. Because she was a duplex with a rigid setup, there was only so many places you could run her. And turning her around was always a nightmare because she didn't fit on any turntables. She was too big. The rails had not been designed with this monster in mind, so they could only put her on very specific routes, and even there, well, again, turning her was always a bit of a pain. But that said, they did use her as much as possible, and that proved to be quite a bit. Monthly mileage reports showed that she racked up over 10,000 miles on average, which is extremely high for an engine that was considered experimental, and more than the average K4s, to be clear. Plus, with the busy wartime traffic during World War II, she wound up paying off her own construction cost within just a year. So from a financial perspective, for a time, at least when it came to her build, she was very successful. But they never gave her any sisters because, again, she was just too friggin' big. And after the war was over, well, she trucked on for a little bit longer, but not for very long. To begin with, her size was the biggest problem, which is why the T1s, which were also duplexes, were not nearly her size. They were big, but not her. However, the T1s came with some issues, namely that they used a poppet-style valve gear that gave them trouble, which actually the S1 was supposed to have, and didn't due to technical issues, and that actually worked out better for her because she just used a wall shards. When in doubt, just use a wall shards. It's one of those, you know? It's suspected that her last runs would have been done in 1946, though it's not 100% known exactly when she was officially pulled from regular running and thrown into storage. And originally, she was actually supposed to be preserved, though. While they didn't plan on running her anymore, and even the T1s didn't last long because they started dieselizing, the S1 was the Pensie's baby, and they knew she was their baby. She was big and impressive, and definitely belonged in a museum. Designating her for preservation was discussed within the Pensie's board pretty early on. However, the problem was, the Pennsylvania Railroad's financial situation. After World War II was over, the railroads in America all took a steep downturn. People were buying cars, businesses were shipping using trucks, and airlines were emerging. The Pennsylvania Railroad was ill-equipped to deal with this, as a lot of railways were, and they were starting to lose money and having to downsize. The S1 just had too much scrap value for them to ignore. And thus she was destroyed in 1949, which is such a friggin' tragedy. Look. Regardless of whether you think she was a good idea, or should have been given sisters, or whatever, this was an impressive engine that worked really well. Especially given the hurdles of developing a functional duplex design. She was not perfect, she was just too big to be manageable, but the fact that she was so enormous and worked as well as she did is impressive on its own. She should have been sent to a museum. But no. She's gone. And it hurts me.
Remember what she meant to us. Remember what they took from us.
Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.